It's rare to hear women share their abortion stories, even though experts estimate 1 in 4 women in America have had an abortion. But today, 3 lawmakers, all women of color, courageously testified about their personal experiences with abortions before a House Oversight Committee hearing on state anti-abortion laws. One of them was Representative Cori of Missouri, who chose to get an abortion after she was raped as a teenager. Take a listen to her powerful testimony.
Choosing to have an abortion was the hardest decision I had ever made. But at 18 years old, I knew it was the right decision for me. It was freeing, knowing I had options. Even still, it took long for me to feel like me again until most recently when I decided to give this speech. So to all the black women and girls who have had abortions and will have abortions, we have nothing to be ashamed of.
For me, terminating my pregnancy was not an easy choice, the most difficult I've made in my life, but it was my choice. And that is what must be preserved for every pregnant person.
But I'm compelled to speak out because of the real risks of the clock being turned back to those days before Roe versus Wade, to the days when I was a teenager and had a back alley abortion in Mexico. Now, I was one of the lucky ones, Madam Chair. A lot of girls and women in my generation didn't make it. They died from unsafe abortions.
Joining me now to discuss are the co-hosts of Rewire News Group podcast, Boom, Lawyered, Jessica Mason Pieklo and Imani Gandy. Imani, I want to get, first of all, your just gut reaction to this very powerful testimony we heard today on the Hill.
I think it's really important, especially as we lawyers and we policy wonks talk about laws and policies in the Supreme Court. I think it's important to remember that at the end of the day, at bottom, this is about people. This is about pregnant people, pregnant patients and their needs. And this is about the providers who are under siege in states like Texas and Mississippi simply for providing care. And so I think that the fact that there was this testimony today from these 3 women of color really honed in on the fact that we need to be talking about people. It's important for people who've had abortions to tell their stories, and it's important for people to hear them because, as the head of We Testify, which is an abortion storytelling group, Renee Bracy Sherman always says, everybody loves somebody who's had an abortion. And so the more people talk about it, the less stigma is going to be attached to it, and the more we can talk about it as a human rights issue and not so much as a legal issue.
So Jessica, having 3 women of color testifying today seemed like a tactical move on the part of the Democrats. What did it mean to put that face on this issue?
Well, I think to Imani's point, it really centers the fact that this is, while we think of abortion often as a political conversation and a political debate, this is really central to healthcare for people. And in particular, the folks who are most impacted by the rollback of reproductive rights are women of color and patients of color. And so it is absolutely important that those stories are front and center because they are the folks who are bearing the burden the hardest in all of this.
So Imani, in Florida, a lawmaker has introduced a bill that is very similar to the Texas abortion bill. It bans most abortions early in the pregnancy, around 6 weeks. It allows members of the public to essentially act as vigilantes and sue anyone who helps a woman to end a pregnancy. Is this what we have to look forward to? This is going to be the playbook? They're just basically going to copy the Texas law until and unless someone knocks it down or the courts you kind of rule that it's unconstitutional?
Absolutely. I mean, we see this all the time. There are a couple of key states, Texas being one of them, where they sort of set these trial balloons. They put up these trial balloons. They try a 6-week ban, or they try a 15-week ban, or now Texas has tried this bizarre enforcement mechanism, and that's absolutely going to spread to other states that are hostile to abortion. And the reason that this particular law is so nefarious is because it is outside the normal course of litigation. Normally, with a law like this that's so obviously unconstitutional, it would be blocked almost immediately. And then while the case is ongoing for however many years it takes for a case like this to proceed, some 3-4 years sometimes, that law is blocked. This law was particularly crafted so that it could evade an injunction, so that it could evade a remedy. The normal remedy of a law like this would be to block it. And so we're going to see this spread throughout the states because and the anti-choicers think that they have come up with something really clever, and perhaps it's clever, but it's also really diabolical. It's a way to sort of shred democracy in the state of Texas or the state of Florida or any other state that plans to do this. And it's also an attack on pregnant patients, an attack on lawyers who would challenge these laws, and it's an attack on the human right to abortion.
Mhm.
Jessica, the Women's March is taking place this Saturday, and it's taking place as the last abortion clinic in Mississippi is hanging on by a thread. You know, what can we expect in the coming days, coming weeks, coming months until this is resolved by the courts as state after state march across, particularly across the South, probably other parts of the country as well, and establish really restrictive laws that basically ban abortion, or put so much pressure that you only have one or two clinics left who can be targeted by relentless, protest, and you kind of shame women and girls into not accessing and exercising their constitutional rights.
It is a really dire landscape ahead of us if the court does what everybody believes that the court will do later this term in the Mississippi case. And so it's wonderful to see activists and advocates coming together and organizing things like marches. I really hope that as that happens across the weekend, they are centering abortion funds, they're centering abortion patients, they're centering and providers, they're centering the people who are feeling this impact the most, because that's really important. I think it's also encouraging that we have had 2 days in a row of congressional testimony around the abortion rights attacks across the country. Today's testimony and then yesterday's testimony in the Senate Judiciary Committee on the Supreme Court and SB 8 and the shadow docket. This is important not because it's just theater. I mean, hearings don't necessarily produce a lot, but what we are doing now is galvanizing attention. And look, we folks are going to have to deal with the reality that abortion access could depend on your zip code, at least in the short term. And so we have a moment now to really get folks' attention focused on this before the court hears arguments in December and then likely rules in June when we expect the ruling to come. That's opportunity to put pressure on lawmakers in Congress. That's opportunity to put pressure on lawmakers in your own states, and to really try and change the conversation. Because the other thing that we know is no matter how the courts rule in June, the anti-choice community will not stop. No matter what the courts do, it will not be enough for them. So this is a battle that continues.
Imani Gandy and Jessica Mason Pieklo, thank you both for this important conversation tonight. I really appreciate it.